guys. So what we are going to be doing today with our beautiful and hopefully all finished drawing, we will be painting it. If you are at home and you do not have watercolors, you can skip this part and you can just color it nicely using your crayons or your colored pencils. When you are painting, you are going to need a few things. Number one, make sure that you do have this drawing finished. You should have at least 6 little shapes or egg shapes or bunnies, chickens, anything like that, but you need to have 6 of those curved shapes, those egg shapes. Some of them we turned into bunnies, some of them we turned into chickens. When you are finished with your patterns and you have your whole drawing done, make sure there is also not a lot of empty space at the top. Some people have been doing their eggs a little bit shorter, so they have a big empty area at the top of their drawing. Make sure that you do add, you could add either the sun, some clouds, butterflies, birds, anything like that up in the sky if you did have a lot of empty space up there. So looking at our picture, I have already started to paint it. When you are painting, you would need, of course, a paintbrush. You will need a little bit of water, and you're going to need your watercolors. So I'm using this set right here. If you're coming to school, I'm going to have some watercolors for you to use. If you are at home, you can either use your own watercolors, or if you don't have any at home, you can just use your crayons and color in with your crayons instead, if that's all you have. So when you begin to use watercolors, the first thing you're going to need to do is make sure that you get your brush wet. So you'll dip it into the water, but you don't want it dripping wet. We're not trying to make messes. So I will usually dip it into the water and then tap it just a little real light on the side. Then I'm going to take my watercolors and I'm going to move this so you can actually see it under the camera, but you shouldn't need to move this yourself. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the blue right here, and I'm going to go from the top down, kind of just like, it makes me think of how a puppy or like a little kitty cat might lick you. So you're never pressing super hard, grinding into this. You're just doing little licks with the brush to get that color onto your brush. Do you see that blue? You can kind of see it there now. So a couple of licks, and then you can go onto your paper, find where you want to put the blue. I'm going to put it into the little tie that I made for our baby chick. Now, at the start of using your brush, you might get some puddles. If you are having puddles, just try to paint and move that color, that watercolor, around as quick as you can, but not so quick that you're making a mess. So I am still trying to stay inside my lines and painting it in nicely. Now, if you start to hear this scritchy, scratchy kind of sound, that is most likely the brush making that noise because it's dry. If that's the case, you could either go over here. If you look in this area, it's a bit darker. That's because there's a lot of watercolor there. You can put your brush in there, tap into that wet area, and then bring some of that over here. Or you could just tap into your water and get a little more water on there. Now, if you dip really far into your water to get it wet again, it's going to make your color a lot lighter because it's going to have a lot of water in it then. And water, at least if you're using clean water, it is not going to have a color to it. So it will lighten up your paint a whole lot. So if you end up getting too much water in your brush, you can either use a a little bit of a paper towel or a tissue, and you can dab onto it to get some of the extra water off. Or you can just go back into your paint and get some more of that color onto your brush there. When you are painting, you need to be sure that you are not putting big puddles of water. Now, if you used lined paper at home to draw this, you need to not paint today because lined paper is very thin. If you hold it up, you can really easily kind of see through it. That paper isn't made to absorb or drink up much of the water. So if you use watercolor on lined paper, it is probably going to rip, and the very least it's going to be very messy. So I would not paint at home if you didn't use like a nice white piece of paper, like construction paper, or even if you have your own watercolor paper at home, that would be great as well. But not everybody has watercolor paper. Sometimes it can be a little bit expensive. So when we're at school, I usually just have us use this kind of thicker construction paper, but even with this, you have to be careful that you're not putting a lot of water onto it or a lot of watercolor because it will start to rip. So be very careful about that. Where else do I want to put blue? So when I'm finished with my blue here, I kind of like to look around and see if there's anywhere else I would want to use that color before I rinse it out because I still have some on my brush. So I'm going to just go up here and start painting into these polka dots up on this egg. Now you can probably see that here it's getting a lot lighter. So this isn't the same blue as this one. And it's not because the color really changed. I mean, I guess it changed a little bit, but it's mostly that we've used so much of it over here that it's starting to dry. It's starting to fade. So all you really need to do is dip your brush into the water a little bit to get it wet again, and then go back to your watercolor and get a little more color. Remember, you're just kind of licking like a little puppy or a little kitty cat, not pressing hard. Because even look at that, like this has gotten really dark now because that watercolor is very strong. So I'm going to go back over this one so I can get a little bit more blue in there. And I'm just going to fill in these polka dots very carefully. If you make a mistake, that's fine, but you're trying your best. See, look, I already made a mistake right there. So I'm just going to try and make the little curve a little bit bigger. And ta-da! You can barely see it now. As watercolors dry, they will get a little bit lighter. So if you need to go back over it, you could while it's wet, but I wouldn't go back over it again once you're finished because you don't want your paper to tear. When I'm painting, I'm going from the top down. I'm never pressing hard. I'm never pressing the brush down and splitting apart his bristles. So his hair here, I want it always going the same direction. So when I press down, do you see how his bristles, his hair is pointed this way? You want the hair of the brush to always point the same direction so you don't ruin your brush. So we got to take care of our brushes, whether you're using a brush at home or you're using one of mine here at school. And I don't know if you noticed that, but I went over here and I got some of this extra back onto my brush. And I'm going to get some from there. So we have a little more over here. So just make sure you're taking your time. I really enjoy painting. It's very calming, at least for me. If you're not a great painter, you're not a great artist, that's fine. You don't have to be yet. That's why you're taking the art class, so you can get better and better. You will want to be careful with your hand because thankfully this is mostly dry, but if you're putting your hand down on the paper like I was there, you're gonna get your hand into the paint. So you might want to make sure that you're keeping your hand up, or at least make sure that you're not putting your hand down in an area you just painted in. Now that I am done, I'm going to switch to a different color. I would not want to switch to a color already. This brush is still dirty, so you need to rinse it out, and that's what your water cup is also for. So I'm going to press in and press lightly at the bottom, not pushing hard, just lightly, and swirl very slowly. I'm not trying to make waves or splashes. This isn't about making messes. So you're just pressing lightly with the brush to get a lot of that color out. Now, of course, when you bring it up, it's going to be dripping wet. You don't want to go this drippy wet into your paint. So tap lightly to get a couple of those extra water droplets off that you don't really need. And then you can go and switch to a new color. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the red. And if you cleaned it the correct way, you shouldn't see any other color mixed in there with your red. So a lot of people, they make their watercolors really, really messy because they keep going from one to the other to the other, and then it's just all nasty and messy, and we don't want that for our watercolors. So I'm going to go over here and start painting into this heart. Now, of course, since we just got this brush wet again, there's going to be a lot of watercolor on it. So be very careful. Be very careful, and it's usually even better to use bigger shapes the first thing you brush in. So I wouldn't want to get a new color and then go exactly for his little beans here because they're very small and there might be almost made a mess. There might be too much water on there. So try to make sure that when you are using your brush the first time with that first big amount of watercolor on the brush, it's better to start with the bigger shape. And if you're not going to do that, that's fine, but you're going to have to be a little more careful because watercolors they can get a little bit crazy sometimes. Because water will just start flowing everywhere if you're using too much of it. And we don't want big puddles. We want to have a nice piece of pretty art. I'm trying to figure out if I want this chicken up here to be yellow. I don't know. I might put a little bit of red. I'm going to just do a little red. And then maybe I'll do some yellow up there. And I'll show you how you can mix. So I'm just, oh no, let me move the paper again. I'm going to put a little bit of red in here. And it's getting a little light, but that's fine because I'm not hearing that scratchy sound yet. If you start to hear the scratchy sound, you're either pressing too hard or again, your brush is too dry and you need to get more water. All right, and then, I kind of want this nose to be pink, so since there's not much on here, now this is a red that I used, but since it started to fade and it's getting lighter, it's going to look more pink. And I wanted the nose here to be pink. And let's see, I'm going to go over here, get a little bit of this because it's still a little wet. And see if I can get the beans all painted in on the bunny without having to get more red. It should be awesome. I think we're going to make it. I think it's going to work. Yay! There we go. Do we want to make the belly pink? Yeah, let's make the belly pink as well. So again, I'm going back over here, tapping, and then press. Now, if you run out of color, so if you see here, I'm running out of color, what you can do, since I want this to stay light, I'm just going to get a little tap of wetness, a little tap of water on here, and now I can move this color around a little bit better. Do you see how it's a little bit, it's really, really light. It's a little hard to see. Let me pick my paper up. So you see that really, really soft pink? So I just got a little more water on there, and then I'm trying to move a little bit of that color around. Be careful to not be scratching and pressing, so you're not pressing down like this. You're pressing lightly, trying to go just one direction, left and right, picking up the hair, or you can go from top, from like up to down. Might be able to get a little more red out. Oh, yay, I did. So looking for those still kind of wet areas that I used at the beginning because they still have a lot of the red watercolor in them. You could have just gotten more red from your paint palette, but the thing is, if you use this, it's going to be very dark and very bright and strong, and I wanted this to be a soft pink. So that's pretty good. Now I'm going to go in and rinse out my brush again. Now the bunny is probably going to be white. Oh, I forgot the ears. Oh well, I'll do that later. So I forgot the inside of the ear for the bunny, but that is probably going to be pink too. So I'm going to work on some of my eggs now. I think I'm going to go to this one. I want to try some purple. So kind of licking very lightly with the brush, pressing lightly, not trying to push into it, not trying to scoop like ice cream or anything like that. Then I'm going to go on to this one and just brush out. That purple is so pretty. Now again, very, very, very wet because it's water. It's watercolor. So make sure that you don't leave any big puddles. If I do get a little bit of a puddle, I like to move to another area, get some of the wetness off of my brush, and then go back to that puddle, pick up some of that color, and then just kind of bring it down here. So your brush is going to be able to absorb some of the water, but it's really just moving it around for you. It's just a tool to get it moving and put it where you want it. But that paper, if you're not moving kind of quickly, the paper is going to drink that water up and it won't want to move anymore. And if you use too much water, then it will tear. So you got to be very careful. I think that looks pretty good. And get some purple down in here. And see if there's any more wetness up here I can get. It's getting a little bit lighter. I really like that purple, so I think I'm going to just get my brush a little wet again and go right back on it. Now, if you use too much water on accident, you might have a puddle over here. So if you have a puddle here, don't get more water. You don't need any more. You can just dip or lick with the brush and get some of that water there up instead. Ooh, that's really bright. Really, well, really strong. I guess it's not very bright. I'm going to make these flowers purple. purple as well. So again, I'm trying to go a little bit faster because I don't want any puddles, and I want to be able to get this painted in before the water starts to dry. A watercolor painting will dry pretty quick unless you have puddles, which you shouldn't. Hopefully you won't. But that first flower is still very, very wet. So I'm hoping I can get some of that picked up. Painting does take longer than coloring, but it comes out really nice. So just make sure you're taking your time. This should not be something you are trying to rush. Alright, I'm going to finish this last flower, and then I'm probably going to stop there. I'm going to go back into this, and look at all of this color down here. I'm going to see if I can move some of that. Maybe I'll make these eyes on my chicken blue as well. So just doing my best to stay inside the lines. And as you're painting this, you can be thinking about if there's anywhere else you want to use this purple, or if we need to wash out our brush when we're done. Maybe I can put, anything else I can make purple? Because we got a lot of color down here. Maybe we can just darken this up a little bit. Oh no. So again, mistakes aren't the end of the world so long as you're not just making tons and tons of mistakes. If you're making tons and tons of mistakes, you're probably not learning. So it's important to learn from those mistakes. All right. Now, I don't know if you can hear that noise, so it's starting to make that scratchy sound, so I would want to get some more water onto my brush. Let's see, is there anything else I want to make purple? I don't think so. So when you put the purple in here, you'll see a lot of color come out because purple is pretty dark. And so you're just swirling to get as much of that color, if not all of that color, out of your brush. Now, as your water starts to get dirty, that is going to hurt your colors. So if I try and use yellow after I used a purple, that's not going to look that good because the color of this water is going to darken up your yellow. So be very careful about that. If your water is getting really, really dark or really messy, you're going to want to get some fresh water so it doesn't mess up your beautiful painting. Let's see, what else can we do here? Maybe some green. We haven't used any green. All right, let's go into this zigzag. I like this. So when you are finished painting, you will need to let it sit and dry for a little while. And once it's dry, if you're at home, you can send me a picture. And if you're at school, I'm going to be grading it while you're here, so you won't have to worry about pictures. A little more water and some more color. So when I'm going onto the paint, I am not pressing a ton over there. So remember, the watercolor is very, very strong. So you don't have to press for very long or do the licking motion for very long. A little more water. Back over here for some more color. All right. Now, I am not finished with my painting. You need to be sure that you're painting as much of it in as possible, unless there's areas that you want to stay white. Like my bunny, I want my bunny to stay white, and on my little chicken over here, he is still in part of his egg, so I'm going to leave that part white and the bunny white, but all of the other parts of the eggs and this guy up here, I'm going to paint in. So make sure that you get everything painted. I will put a picture of my finished painting up under this video in Schoology, so you'll be able to see it as well. When you finish with your painting, this one isn't done yet, so make sure that you keep going if you're copying mine. What you're going to need to do is take your brush, press again lightly at the bottom. You always want to make sure that you clean your brush at the end. It isn't very difficult to clean watercolor brushes or when you've been watercoloring, so long as you weren't pushing really, really hard into the paint on the palette. If you were pushing really hard into this, it's going to be a lot more difficult to clean your brush because you weren't following the directions. So once I have it all done, I'll press on the side to get some of that extra water off, just like that, on both sides, and then I can just let my brush dry. If you have a paper towel or a tissue, you could also press lightly onto that once you've cleaned it all out, and then just let it air dry. And that's it. All right, guys, I can't wait to see your beautiful paintings. I'm really excited that if you're at school, you're getting to come back to my room, and hopefully we'll get these done and you can take them home as decorations for Easter. I'll see you in the next video.